back to the Senior Focus. I'm your host, Attorney Nick Kaltsis. I'm here with Attorney Mike Moore and
Senator Michael Moore, not attorney.
Senator Mike Moore. I'm sorry, I got a little bit ahead of myself here. We were talking about the 19,000 accounts that came back as a result of almost 500,000 letters going out. 19,000 came back, and I know one of the questions that's been asked is, well, do you not know who receives these benefits? If the 19,000 letters went out and they weren't able to confirm an address or a person, does that mean that there's a person out there that might no longer live in Massachusetts? Maybe they live in Rhode Island, they collect from Rhode Island, they collect from a state they don't even live in anymore. What do you think about this 19,000 accounts?
Well, I think everyone just goes to the negative when they look at that number.
Mm-hmm.
But if we look at the positive aspect of this, is that if there were 478,000 that was sent out, 19,000 is a very small percentage.
Right.
So we actually confirmed the address of, what, 457,000?
I think now I remember. I think Governor Patrick said it was like 7.7%. Or 7%. Yeah, I think he said 7%.
Okay, so we confirmed
93%.
92.3%
Right.
of the addresses.
Right.
But more importantly, of that 19,000, 11,200, I think they said, that they sent out to, they actually confirmed weren't receiving any benefits anyways.
Right.
And these individuals had no legal responsibility to notify DTA of a move. So in some ways, this lawsuit, I guess, and this mailing actually helped cleanse the system as far as some people being on there that shouldn't have to be on there. But now we still have the 7,700.
Right,
that we
something like that.
So now we've got that 7,700 to confirm. So in some ways, besides the vote aspect of it, it did help us purge the system within welfare as finding who's on there that shouldn't be, confirming addresses, and maybe if we can reduce that 7,700 to try to find out where they are.
Yeah, I think they did further reduce the 7,700 by coming out and saying that some of the 7,700, I'm not sure of the exact number, the percentage, were people who submitted applications whose applications were denied.
Okay, so
I would think that it would be a good thing and a positive thing for the Patrick administration to be more vocal about what it is that, you've highlighted about 11,000 not having a requirement to let DTA know that, they've moved, or that, they no longer are receiving the benefits or whatever. Yeah, that would be very helpful.
Again, if you look at the fact that if they've taken it from the 478,000 down to 7,700, and I was just saying if that even got reduced, if that got reduced even further, the purging in the system, in that this actually had there was a lot of benefit to it. I think everyone automatically, when you get numbers back like this, they automatically go to the negative and say, oh, look, we don't know, we've got 20,000 people, we don't know what's going on. Well, look at the positive end of it. And I mean, granted, now that we've identified this issue,
right,
now we can go one step further and hopefully further identify any outstanding issues.
I think that
in some ways, this is what we should be doing more often, is going out and trying to confirm.
Oh, I think we should do this, regularly, like with Mass Health. There's an annual re-verification. You have to establish to the satisfaction of the agency that you're still entitled to receive their benefits, and in the event you don't respond and provide them the verifications that establishes to their satisfaction that you're eligible for their benefits, you don't receive their benefits.
Well, exactly. Now,
so I think this would be a really good thing. Do it once a year.
Exactly. So now they send something out, there's no response back, they see a check going out somewhere,
stop
the check.
Right. You take a look at the amount of welfare spending that occurs, and it's a rather frightening thing. I mean, you hear, everyone knows that the economy is not in a good way. We're struggling with the fiscal cliff, and we're approaching the fiscal cliff, and at the 11th hour, apparently, the legislators on the federal level in Washington reached agreement. We avoid the so-called fiscal cliff.
A limited agreement.
Yeah, I don't know that reaching the fiscal cliff would be such a bad thing. I think it would not be a good thing. I don't know how bad of a thing it would be. I think that...
if you look back, though, to a year ago,
yeah,
when the fiscal cliff talk was going on and then the debt ceiling, and we saw our bond rating being reduced, I think if we hadn't come to an agreement, it would have been far worse. I mean, there were a lot of economists that had talked about if we didn't reach the fiscal cliff, come to a compromise, but this also included debt ceiling, that that could bring about another recession.
Right.
So, and there were so many cuts on the end that we were going to be looking at on the state level that that happens in Washington, happens here in Worcester, that we would be looking at. So I think in some ways they should have agreed. They should have agreed, I think, to a bigger package. But at least they've agreed to the revenue aspect of it. It's one step. I wish it was a total package, but it's one step.
Depending what happens, and not in 2 months, not in 3 months, we have a new legislative body. What were they sworn in on Monday or something like that? I think it was Monday.
No, well, maybe. I was sworn in on the 2nd.
Okay.
I think they were sworn in on the next day, the 3rd or 4th.
Okay. So in any event, now we have a group of people in Washington who, hopefully are going to lead us out of this. We've got, like you say, we'll say step one. They have addressed, I guess they've addressed the revenue issue. I'm not certain that, it's a sufficient means by which to address this issue by looking at I don't think that the revenue issue is at all going to help them. It's going to help us. The elephant in the closet, I would think, is the spending. Yeah. And I don't think really anything got cut in spending.
Well, not part of that. That's what I mean. The
right, first half.
The first half just had to do with the revenues that would be coming in. Now they have to look at, well, actually, two issues they have to look at. They have to look at the cuts,
right,
and then they have to look at raising the debt ceiling. And this is also why I think it would have been very detrimental to the economy. Is in the Associated Industry of Massachusetts, the chambers, they all follow the business index, confidence index.
Right.
The more we have Washington struggle over coming to compromises and reaching an agreement on issues, confidence in the economy is going to, I think, is going to maybe give a business owner the confidence to, well, I may go out and buy some more, I may go out and expand, I may hire some more employees. Or the person on the streets, I have money in the bank, I feel stable, I'm not going to lose my job, I'm going to go out and spend, I'm going to go travel, I'm going to do things. So by constantly having us on the edge, I don't think it helps the economy because it hurts the confidence and people are afraid to go out. So there's a spiraling effect.
Do you think people are less afraid now than they were a week ago? I don't think so. I think I feel it in my business. I think that I see it in business in general. There's probably, on average, I see 1 or 2 people moving out of my office building, on the office building I'm in. Yeah. I think that the economy is in a shambles. It's I think a very drastic.
I don't think it's in a shambles, but I think it's in if it could be in a state of confusion.
Right.
I think it's in a state of confusion because they don't know where we're going.
I disagree. I think it's a shambles. I think the reason we even went to the fiscal cliff, or that there was a fiscal cliff, is because they had reached a debt ceiling, and in response to raising the debt ceiling, they said, hey, there needs to be a commensurate reduction in spending, but they couldn't agree to what spending cuts there would be. So they raised the debt ceiling and they said, hey, if by the end of the year we don't have a budget with, sufficient spending cuts, we're going to cut across the board spending, whether it's domestic spending or on the military. And rather than implement those across the board cuts, unlike, what was it, like December 30th, the 31st, or something, talk about the last moment, they passed a bill, they addressed certain revenue components, which, we'll talk about in a moment, did absolutely nothing about spending. I look at it as, and I'm not singling out Democrats or Republicans or anyone. I think our legislators in Washington kicked the can down the road. They didn't do anything meaningful to address our economic, I think it's an economic calamity.
Well, I think the kicking the can it's premature right now because we don't know what's going to happen in the next 2 months with the debt ceiling and the cuts that they're looking at. Again, because they eliminated one aspect of what they were trying to determine, and that was the revenue component. So now, if the kicking the can is going to come as far as if they just don't make any cuts, or either way, the debt ceiling has got to be increased. The only issue, one of the issues I have with this whole process is if you look prior to last year and the debt ceiling, when this all became light, you never had an administration. You never had a Congress, and this goes Republican or Democrat. When they were when you had a Democratic president or a Republican president prior to President Obama, you never had a Congress that held the debt ceiling over their head. You never put the full faith and credit of the United States at jeopardy. So I think it's a little. I think it's a little overboard or aggressive on what's being done as far as using the debt ceiling right now, because there's a lot at stake, and it's never been done before to do to a president of either party. But I do think that, as you're saying, as far as the kicking the curb down the road in the future, that's all going to depend on what comes out of the negotiations.
Right.
If they bring us to the point where we're going to see a debt or bond rating lowered again, people losing faith in the full faith and credit of the United States, yeah, then we could have issues.
I think, 2 points. The first being that I don't know of an administration that has had to repeatedly increase the debt ceiling. I'm not saying that the debt ceiling hasn't been raised, and it's been raised repeatedly in, over history. And, I think it's a terrible, terrible thing for all of us, because, I mean, in your household, are you able to, increase your debt ceiling whenever you want to? If Right, none of us can. So I don't think it's appropriate for the government, the federal government, to continually, raise the debt ceiling, at least not with the frequency that we see it occurring right now. I mean, we raised the debt ceiling like 8 months ago.
But you got to remember, that was, I can't tell you, going back to the Bush administration, both Bush administrations, Clinton, how many times they raised the debt ceiling. I have to go back and look at it. I know that it was raised, but I don't know on what frequency.
Right. And it has been raised repeatedly. I'll agree with that.
But we don't know
the frequency.
If what the debt ceiling would have been raised to last year, if it wasn't brought to such a calamity type of situation, traumatic situation for the United States. And I do think the federal spending or federal government should be like the majority of the states, and there should be a balanced budget amendment.
I agree with that.
This way people are given choices. I mean, God forbid that if we ever had a war that came up, and the people have given a choice. Look, if we're going to go to war, like in Afghanistan and Iraq, you had public sentiment, we're going in. People would have paid whatever the cost of taxes increase, or whatever things would affect for us to go in there to protect ourselves. I mean, I think we got to give them those choices. But when you go back to when you have a situation where you cut taxes and then you borrow money. I mean, that's not giving the public a choice, and that's not holding the government to be fiscally responsible. So I think we should go back. There's ways that people say, well, if you balance budget amendment, then if a war comes up or something comes up, there's no way for the government to get the money. But people need to give you choices.
We're going to talk about the wars, and we're going to talk about the taxes, and we're going to talk about the spending and the lack of spending cuts. But before we do, we have to head to a break. So when we come back, we'll talk about all those issues.